everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Black Man's Roundtable. I'm your host, Rodney Butler.
I'm Kevin Evans, co-host.
And tonight we have a special guest in the house. We've got Miss Attorney Whitney Kenner Jones. Whitney is running for the coveted District 2 commissioner seat. And Whitney, we're glad to have you. Tell the people a little bit about yourself before we get started with the questioning.
Well, I'm so thankful and glad to be here tonight. Been excited and just waiting for the opportunity to come on the Black Man's Roundtable. First, I do want to say thank you guys for having this platform. It's so needed, especially in our community, so I applaud you for that. But a little bit about me, as you mentioned, I am an attorney here in Georgia. I'm licensed in Georgia and in Oregon. I have been a public servant my entire life. I come from a military family. Both my parents served in the Army, so I'm a military brat, had the opportunity to kind of live all over, and I decided once I saw Douglas County that this was home and I was going to be here forever, and so now I'm just doing what I can to make sure that this place is as wonderful as possible for my family to grow, live, and play. So I'm just excited to be here.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Whitney. And I'm going to start with the questioning. We're going to dip right into it because we got a lot of questions tonight, and I'm going to get started. Okay, our first question, Whitney, is under background and qualifications. Part one of it is, what motivated you to run for the position of county commissioner?
So I have always had an interest in politics and in public service. My actual undergraduate degree is in public health. So I have always really kind of had a desire to help people through community-based initiatives, community-based work. A couple of years ago, I actually wanted to get into politics and thought, I'm just going to, crash in, take the stage. I ran for Senate, and through that race, I really learned that the greatest way to effectuate change is to start at the most localized level possible, and that really is through the county commission. That has probably the strongest impact on residents' day-to-day lives, and I know that the background that I have both through diversity, equity, and inclusion work that I have done in the past, also in my professional career currently, but additionally from the perspective of having lived experience from various different places and being able to bring what works really, really well and assisting people in correcting or fixing what's not working so well. I know that I'm able to do those things, and so that's really why I wanted to get involved. And as I mentioned before, like I said, I have 2 children. They have to grow up here. I'm planning on living here until I'm 10 toes up. So I just need this to be a good place for my family to grow, and the best way to do that is to get involved in your local politics.
Okay, great. If there's nothing else that says that you're a military child, is the phrase 10 toes up. All right. Part 2 of that question is, can you briefly outline your relevant experience and qualifications for this role?
So I think I have a very wide array of relevant experience. From a practical perspective, when we lived in Oregon, I actually served as a planning commissioner. Their planning commissioners out there are kind of a hybrid of what our planning commissioners do and then what planning and zoning board does here as well. And so I think that's definitely going to be a benefit because you're going to have to work very directly with the planning and zoning commission, making practical decisions, understanding how intergovernment agreements work, understanding how MOUs work with different agencies, understanding the importance of making sure that we have appropriate architecture and design controls, all while making sure that you are passing balanced budgets, making sure that you are allocating your funding appropriately. I actually have hands-on experience doing that in a community, and our community was extremely successful during my tenure on that board. So just practically speaking, I definitely have experience. I will be able to hit the ground running on day one because my legal background does give me a unique perspective and ability to understand what the contracts are that we are going to be looking over, bringing that perspective, knowing how those laws, rules, or regulations may be affected by something that other people in the room may not be thinking about, may not be considering, and so there won't be such a learning curve in terms of understanding the legal implications of what we are doing. And again, as I said, I have lived in 9 different states. I've lived in other countries too. And so also from a practical perspective, I think I bring just an overall diversity in ideas, and that creativity is definitely going to be helpful and beneficial to the residents of Douglas County.
Great. I'm up next for questions.
Kevin, you got the next set, Kevin?
Okay, my questions come. I got them. Understanding the role, what in your view are the primary responsibilities of the county commissioner?
So in my view, the primary responsibilities of the commissioner are allocation of funds. It is taking in the pot of money, the tax dollars that we are paying into the county, and making sure that those funds are being appropriately distributed across all of our public works. So that could be anything from making sure that EMS and public safety is appropriately funded, to making sure that we've allocated enough budgeting for our infrastructure developments, making sure that every piece of the pie is getting an appropriate portion, so that we continue to fund or that we continue to function well and appropriately. I actually do a microcosm of that right now. I serve as the president on our community's alliance board, and it's a very similar role. We take in 0.5% of all of the sales of new homes in the community, and then it is our goal and responsibility to allocate those funds across various different projects for the neighborhood. Making sure that you also save enough so that your budget stays economically healthy, but also making sure that when you have capital improvements or new things that you want to bring to the area, new programming that you want to see, that there's appropriate funding available for that.
Okay. Second part of that question, excuse me, how familiar are you with the current challenges and opportunities facing our county?
There are a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges, and I think from a challenges perspective, I think we need to move back towards being a human and person-centered economy, and a little bit less of a business-centered economy. That doesn't mean that we shun or don't have new businesses coming in, but I think one of the biggest challenges is a lot of residents, particularly in District 2, feel like their quality of life is being harmed or hampered at the expense of bringing in business. And we've got to really work hard and think strategically about how we can marry those two ideas, so that we are not disproportionately alienating lifelong residents of this county, or people who intend to make this their forever home, just to ensure that we're bringing in money into the county. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. I see that, though, as an opportunity, because people want businesses that are giving back to them. And so if we can find or marry that sweet spot of businesses who really do want to promote educational development and support quality of living for our seniors, that want to pay into our infrastructure advancements, then those are the businesses that we want to attract here and make sure that they're paying into our economy, so that people really do feel like that they're being listened to, or that they're being heard when these decisions are being made.
Thank you. Back at you, Rodney.
Yep. Yes, sir. Next, we have community engagement. And I want to preface this, Whitney, with I believe it's going to be one of your favorite categories, because community engagement is something, that you do a lot. How do you plan to engage with and represent the diverse interests within our community?
So that is a good one. I actually do think that when you have diversity of thought and diversity of ideas, you can get really creative with your community engagement. One of the things that, as part of my platform, or that I think would be really important, specifically for District 2 and Douglas County as a whole, is having the opportunity to have more health initiatives. Douglas County has one of the most extensive trail networks in the state. Statistically speaking, kids who play outside, people who get outside, people who get moving, stay active, and stay healthy tend to do better. The healthier that your residents are and the healthier that your society is, the better and healthier that your economy is. So I would love to see community initiatives that are driven by or are motivating people to get outside and actually use our parks and recreation system. One of the beauties of Douglas County is that each district has its own parks and rec system there. Like, we have Boundary Waters, we have Deer Lick, we have Jesse Davis Park, making sure that people are aware of the resources that we have here and how those can be used so that they can get active, get engaged, and get involved. I would love to continue some of the programming that you do see from the sheriff's department or various police departments, the school's police department, in terms of mentorship opportunities, programs to help make sure that the people who are policing us and overseeing us are also active and engaged in the community. And I also kind of want to make sure that we stop forgetting about or leaving out our other first responders like fire and rescue. I can remember growing up and having the fire department, bring the truck out to the school and let kids know that, careers in fire exist, or this is what's going to happen if the fire department ever has to come to your house, the things that they do that are beyond fire and rescue. And so making sure that we have more initiatives that really kind of remove that layer of our county workers or employees are up here and the residents are over here, and figuring out ways to bring all of those things together. And then, of course, I would love to see more community engagement programs where we can support our local teachers. One of the things that I'm very actively involved, actually started and spearheaded, was a campaign to have the kids be able to ride their bikes to school twice a year. We have a school right here in the community. Kids who get to burn off that excess energy, get to ride, they can sit for longer periods of time. But the whole purpose of that was for the county to see. We kind of do need to look at our infrastructure and what our roads look like, the lack of sidewalks that we have, how we can get safer crossing. Because if you live in a community that has a school available, you want your kids to be able to walk or ride their bikes to school. That's one quick and easy way that they can get active and engaged. Then they're outside, they know their neighbors know them. Get back to a more community focused style of living where everybody's looking out for each other.
Great. All right, part 2 of that question, still under community engagement. What steps will you take to ensure transparency and accessibility in your decision-making process?
So I actually think that Douglas County does do a fairly good job with transparency right now in terms of the information being available. I think the shortcoming is in people not knowing where that information is available and not having campaigns or marketing around making sure that people know where they can get this information. It almost feels to me like the people who are in the know covet that information really, really tightly, and unless you have an en route to it, you don't know where to get it from. So the first thing that I would really like to do would be to have more like fireside chat or chat and choose town halls, whatever cute name you want to call them, to have residents come and be able to bring their concerns and then follow up with them in some form of a newsletter to say, hey, this was addressed at a commission meeting, or this particular topic is coming up, and have that open line of communication so that they can actually come and engage in the meetings as they are occurring, as opposed to what I think we currently have, where people don't come until there is one very specific hot topic on the ballot. And so getting them to the meetings, getting them engaged up front is going to increase transparency in general, because they were there, they were active, they were involved, they saw what happened. Making sure also that, everybody has one of these in their hands, a smartphone that they're carrying around, a computer in their pocket. figuring out a way that we can utilize text messaging or rapid notification systems to make sure that people know when something is coming up that they may want to be active and engaged in. I definitely think that commissioners' votes on specific things should be published, that information should remain on the county's website, and then, of course, making sure that your constituents have access to you so that they know how to reach you by phone or email or coming to your office to make sure that they can speak with you directly as well.
All right, Kevin.
Okay. Economic development. What is your vision for promoting economic development within the county?
I would love to see more economic development spilling over into our workforce readiness. I think that we are already an attractive demographic in Douglas County because of our access to highways, major thoroughfares, things like that. So businesses want to come here, but we have to make sure that they know once they get here that we have well-trained employees that are going to be able to help their businesses be successful, that they're not worried about how long people are commuting from Atlanta to come down here and work at whatever facilities that they're bringing here. And so the first thing that I would do is make sure that we have programs or access to education and funding that helps workforce readiness training. I know when I was in high school, we had programs that were funded by tax dollars that paid towards like automotive certifications, if you wanted to get an EMS certification, if you wanted to apprentice. And so making sure that we have access to those educational paths, because everybody does not want to go to college. We say that over and over again, but we're not really giving a realistic hands-on way to make that not the only option. Making sure that we are promoting the programs that we already have. Like the CCI does a great job in having dual enrollment and letting kids come out of high school with specific certifications and things like that. So I think we will be very attractive to businesses that want to come here once we have the data or ability to show them that we have a very skilled workforce. I also want to see economic development, though, in terms of supporting the local businesses that are already here. Douglas County has a breadth of locally owned businesses, very good restaurants, and so figuring out partnership opportunities, tax incentives that we can provide to the local businesses that are already here. And that also goes back to my initial point about communication, making sure that residents know what's already here so that we can be stimulating our own economy, keeping our dollars here as opposed to taking our dollars elsewhere. I was actually knocking doors in a neighborhood and was very surprised to know that people don't even know that we have Foxhall right here in Douglas County. So people are taking their tax dollars, they're taking their money, spending it up north, going to Chateau Elan or somewhere like that. But we've got a 5-star hotel and resort right here in our backyard where people could be spending their money. If you wanted to do something that's thrilling and exhilarating, we have Banning Mills right here. You can zip line, you can do wilderness trails, you can do all of that. You can ride ATVs right here in our backyard. So making sure that we're having marketing campaigns to let people know what is already here so that people continue to spend our money in Douglas County.
Right. I want to add on to that, if I can. How can you streamline or make that opportunity felony friendly?
Felony friendly?
Yes.
In terms of like our citizens who are re-entering?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, oh God, that is such a loaded question. There
Okay.
is so many things that I would say. First, I would love to make sure that all felons know Georgia is one of the states that you can get your voting rights back if you do not have any more issues within 5 years. And so that, is not directly on point to your question, but, we've got a platform in the audience. So I want to make sure that these folks know, hey, you did your time. You have served your sentence. Go and get your voting rights back because that's your first ticket to power. We have really got to look at the requirements that we have for our citizens who are re-entering everyday society in terms of housing. If you don't have an address, you have access to nothing. You cannot get a driver's license. You cannot get an ID. You cannot meet the reporting requirements for probation or parole. Like, there's just so many things. So we would need to look at what our housing requirements are. You know, there's a lot of states that have campaigns for ban the box and things like that. And I think for certain issues that is something that we probably do need to look into, because if you, if you were doing nonviolent crimes, that should not keep you from being able to live in an apartment complex. I feel like you just gave me a question that like speaks directly to the public health in me, and so my mind's all over. But I just, that making sure that we are looking at, and this is definitely much more of a statewide issue than a Douglas County specific issue, but kind of getting some of these stupid laws off the book. For instance, if you are a felon, you can't be a barber. Well, that's an excellent career. That's something that you can pick up while you are in prison, and you can come out of that being a work-ready citizen, ready to stimulate the economy. So we really have to use some common sense when we are talking about how we can help these citizens re-enter and be productive members of society. Looking at access to educational opportunities and figuring out if we can help them get into a trade school, what a stipend might look like for that, to help them re-enter is definitely something that I think would benefit the county. And I mean, we're already paying so much into the sheriff's department and into the jail here anyway. We might as well educate them while they are there so that they don't go back.
You actually answered my question. I think you did. I think you did. And that's been a problem with a lot of people. They get out and can't do anything, but they're willing and able to work. But they can't.
I see them every day in my court, and it actually is heartbreaking. We have so many parents who the only reason that they can't get their kids back is because they don't have access to safe and stable housing. You've done all of this work on a case plan. You've answered for your crimes. You've paid your time. I'm thinking, specifically about one gentleman right now. I mean, could not be trying harder to be a model citizen at this point. You've had so many hard knocks and setbacks. And I'm not negating, your choice to not do right or wrong, but making a mistake should not completely dissolve the remainder of your ability to earn an income and live a successful life when you are genuinely wanting to do right. And a lot of that starts with making sure we're looking at appropriate reentry programs, and we definitely don't have enough of those, and we certainly don't have enough mental health treatment programs in this state. That kind of takes me, I guess, back to the Board of Commissioners and the current budget. The Douglas Cobb Community Services Board is one of only 22 in the entire state. There's 159 counties in Georgia. We have one of only 22 Community Services Board. The Community Services Board is one of the largest service providers for mental health services. That is one of DFACS's largest referral sources for us to send these parents to get treatment. So we've got to make sure that we have a budget that is able to, one, support the volume. There's over 8,000 people in Douglas County that are struggling with mental health issues and with substance use issues. We cannot forget about them just because we don't necessarily agree with their life choices or wherever they are. Like, we have to figure out some way to service these people, and cutting their budget definitely wasn't the way to do that. That is a program that should have stayed well funded at the rate that it was at, if not higher, because of the work that they do. And I think that that's where intergovernment agreements come into play, and understanding, no, they're not an arm of Douglas County. They are not a Douglas County government agency, but that doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong because we have chose as a community and as a county to make sure that we are funding this private resource because it does so much good for our county.
Great, thank you. Second part of that, how do you plan to attract and retain businesses while balancing environmental concerns?
I definitely think part of my past experience as a planning commissioner in Ridgefield's really helpful to that one. I think that a lot of times people shy away of having requirements for companies to meet because they're afraid the more requirements that you place on them that they won't come and do business with you. But Douglas County is an attractive place to be. People want to be here and do business. We already have low tax rates for businesses. Like, we are already giving business incentives. So let's ask for a little bit more from them. One thing that we did when we were in Ridgefield was making sure that people are thinking about pollution from all aspects. So pollution is not just what you bring into the environment, but light pollution is something else that is an issue, and how that affects and impacts the nocturnal animals that live in habitats in these surrounding areas. Again, we've already talked about Sweetwater Creek, or Sweetwater State Park is right here in all of that wildlife. So something that we did that minimized light pollution was saying that businesses simply cannot use like neon signage. That helps promote the overall aesthetic of the environment or the area that you live in. It's cutting down on light pollution, and it's giving an overall tone and tenor that residents want to see. But also making sure that we're making sure when people are asking for rezoning requests that we're doing the appropriate impact studies on those surrounding neighborhoods and communities, making sure that businesses are coming here with contingency plans to help with runoff, making sure that we're paying attention to appropriate setbacks and variances and easements that need to be in place to protect our natural water resources, to protect the Chattahoochee. Those are things that I definitely think can be built in on the front end when we are approving new businesses coming here, and making sure that they are not adversely impacting the residents that are already here.
Thank you. So you, Rodney?
Yes, sir. We're infrastructure and services, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. I'm gonna make sure I'm all right. Okay, Whitney, 2 parts under infrastructure and services. What priorities do you have for improving local infrastructure such as roads, public transportation, and utilities?
So one thing that I would really love to see is an increased focus on walkability in Douglas County in general and in District 2 specifically. And what I mean by that is we really have got to work on making sure that we are improving connection to neighborhoods and the amenities that we have through the availability of sidewalks. We also need to increase the amount of bike lanes that we have throughout the county so that people can get out and start using that to get around the county, see what is out and what is available. We are very much so way too car dependent in this area. I love the idea of looking at rezoning and things that can help us go towards micro communities so that you can eat, live, work, and play in the area that you live, and having everything be kind of in this 7-mile radius around you. I would love to see some increased traffic studies, especially on Fairburn Road. We have accidents on Fairburn Road almost daily, if not multiple times a day. So looking at what we can do to improve those traffic patterns, if we can use more roundabouts, just ways to make our roads safer for when you do have to drive. But I would love to see infrastructure improvements to increase our walkability and just overall usability, because I definitely think getting back to having more of a community feel is going to have a drastic impact on a lot of things, even things as simple as crime reduction. If you know your neighbors, you're not likely to hurt them. You're not likely to take from them. You're very much so likely to continue to support them. And the easiest and quickest way to do that is to have a way to walk outside safely.
Great. And so, look, you're because you're uniquely qualified for kind of an expansion to that question that I'm about to ask you, and uniquely qualified meaning that you're under 40. If I got that correctly, you're under 40, and you're a mother, and you're also married. I know in the past, one of the things that I would like to see in Douglas County as well is the attraction of young professionals to the community. Young professionals, if you just want young people, who does not have families and that kind of thing, like young single people, they bring a certain perspective, to the community. And then older people, who are married and have a family. And then you have that group in the middle, like yourself. You're still young enough to know what's up, know what's going on, but you also have a family. I want you to just expand a little bit, because that has been one of the things that prior commissioners and prior administrations here in Douglas County has wanted to do, and that is to attract basically your demographic. And just elaborate a little bit on how you being in that demographic, how you plan on really solidifying and attracting your demographic to Douglas County.
I think specifically in my demographic, one is we have got to continue to attract quality in terms of businesses and diversity in businesses. But I think that at least in my generation, we like a niche thing. We like, kind of a smaller, cooler, eclectic. And so, I hear so many people that are saying, oh, we have to have a Whole Foods or we have to have a Trader Joe's. We've got Farmer's Table right here already. If we can find ways to make those resources more robust, then we have what we need here. And my age group or demographic would continue to support that. Here in Tributary, last weekend, actually, we had a farmer's market come directly here. So if we can figure out a way to scale that and have that coming to pod communities so that on a Saturday you can get up and you can say, hey, I live in Parkside Village or I live in Palmer Falls. I know Tributary's having a farmers market this weekend, so we're gonna walk on the new sidewalks that we have, push the kids in strollers, whatever, come over here, make a family day of it, go to the farmers market, have a picnic or whatever. I do think that things like that are very attractive to that demographic. We've got to get some mix of diverse nightlife in Douglas County because young parents like me, we still, we like to cut a rug, have a good time, go out a little bit. So, and I don't necessarily always want to drive to Atlanta to do that. And so, we're doing a good job with restaurants like Per Se or a Fin and Feathers. But, something, I would love to see something come a little bit closer to District 2 if we could get something in some of these, little strip areas that are not completely occupied. That would be fantastic so that we can, again, keep our economic dollars here. We are doing, I think, a very good job in terms of what we have for the youth. There's, youth sports, the Celebrate Douglas and Douglas County Parks and Recs. They're finding things for kids to do. And the thing I love the most is that they're finding things for kids to do for free. Right. Because if you're in my age group and you have 2 kids and you're a young parent, money is always going to be a hot topic. And so, I don't want to have to go all the way to Atlanta to drop my kids off at the Children's Museum. We got to have some things like that going on in Douglas County. The one area that I would say that we probably need to expand the most based on the population we have, we're very unique in terms of our senior citizens. And I don't know if y'all are staying active and engaged with them, but they're not out here playing with us. Like our senior citizens, they want to go out and they want to have safe spaces to do that. They love to go line dancing. You see them at the Wednesday wind down in the park corridor. So making sure that we are also focusing on continuing to have activities like that are going to bring my demographic. But the one thing we haven't addressed so far is that we have got to have adequate, affordable housing. If we can't afford to bring our young families here, it doesn't matter what amenities we have. You're not going to get that demographic. I saw a study in the news the other day that 3 companies own 19,000 rental homes in the Atlanta metro area. That's something that we can do as a community, putting a moratorium on investment-owned properties, looking at savvy ways to address those or curtail some of that so that people have access in their early and mid and late 30s and early 40s to purchase their first homes. For so many people in my friend group and in my age group, that's just not an attainable goal right now anywhere really across the country. And so we've really got to figure out what is that sweet spot. Not everybody wants to own, and I appreciate Douglas County kind of moving towards that opportunity to have rental townhomes or rental, apartments. But we've got to figure out some way to get back in that sweet spot so that we can start to see those houses that are, $175,000 to $275,000, so that they're actually affordable. And if we don't figure out how to resolve some of this corporate ownership of those houses, we're not going to be able to do that. And unfortunately, if we can't keep on paying into the population of our residents, Douglas County is not going to thrive. We've got to figure that out.
Okay, and before I move on to part two real quick, I just wanted to, I really wanted you to kind of expound on that a little bit, because we have younger people, running for this seat, and we've had people who are older, on the county commission. A lot of people got adult children or that kind of thing, and I think that I wanted for people to understand the importance of having someone in your demographic, because your demographic is the one who keeps cities and counties vibrant. It keeps crime down. You have people who are professional, they work in the community and they stay in the community, they live in the community, they play in the community. And so I just wanted, for you to expound on that a little bit. And you did great. And part two.
I will say that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Listen, I told you already. I'm a chatty Cathy, so don't give me a chance to get the mic. But I will say that is part of what attracted me to Douglas County. I started coming here as a young single person, fresh out of undergrad in 2007. And one of the things that was the most attractive and why I came back is because we did have a wide variety of demographic. You had young single professionals who maybe were looking to, purchase that starter home or still kind of in that rental phase. Maybe you're still in mom and dad's house, maybe you're not. And it was a lovely natural flow of this county into, okay, finding your forever partner, and then, if you want to get married, and then moving into having kids. It seemed like a place that was really following that ebb and flow, and then also making sure that it's taking care of its senior citizens. So I know I'm going to be able to safely live here again until I'm 10 toes up. So, that was really attractive, and we just have to make sure that we keep that. I think being in my age group, having now owned 2 homes in Douglas County, having that experience paying into property taxes and, filing for homestead exemptions and, appealing your property tax bill, I definitely think helps me understand what residents are actually going to be going through here on a day-to-day basis. But I'm in the trenches of it right now. I understand it on a personal level, and it's not so far removed as it might be for some of the older commissioners or older candidates that are running.
Got it. Part two, how do you plan to address the current state of essential services like education, healthcare, and public safety?
Well, the first thing that I would love to do is be able to look and make sure that our fire department, that our EMTs and that E911 is being paid on par with our local county. I feel like in this conversation, they very often get overlooked, and they are one of the most pivotal contributors to us having a safe community. I think when people look at public safety, you automatically think about the sheriff's department, the police department, but we really have to start looking at making sure that we're taking care of those people too, particularly because those are also fields that we can look at workforce readiness. A lot of times to be an EMT does not require you to necessarily have a college degree. These are, you don't have to have a college degree to be a firefighter. And so if we can be working towards workforce readiness coming out of high school, funneling into those programs and making sure that they are earning livable wages so that those careers are desirable, but that they also stay well staffed and well maintained, I think is going to go a long way for our essential services in Douglas County. The same with the coroner's office. We really do need to make sure that the people who are taking care of us at the very end of our lives, that we are entrusting our loved ones who we've lost, that their budgets well funded, and that they have the funds to make sure that they're giving people the dignity that they deserve and that is owed to them at the end of their life. We've kind of already touched on the CSB in terms of health care. I would love Douglas County to kind of be a model for some more progressive or forward-thinking health care. I would love to see more options or opportunity for us to bring back like midwifery programs in high school. We have a deplorable maternal fetal mortality in the state of Georgia as a whole, and Douglas County is not escaping those statistics. And so the easiest way to combat that is to have a well-educated force of people who are looking after these moms and these babies postpartum. So I would love to see money directed towards the public good and making sure that we have some of those programming options available so that we are truly taking care of our citizens from birth to the very end. I think that we really do need to look at some more creative and progressive ways to address that. And then again, I would love to see us have more access to mental health clinics, particularly for our juvenile population. A lot of times when we have kids come into the foster care system, because we don't have that readily available in Douglas County, we're having to send them all the way to Columbus to get treated, or having to send them, closer to Savannah. How do you facilitate visitation with a family and their child's 4 hours away? Like, we're supposed to be here not doing harm to the people that we are supposed to be servicing, and it's an unfortunate series of events. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but if we have nowhere to treat them, what are we going to do? And so I would love to look at opportunities to find funding in our budget so that we can have localized clinics to be able to provide those services. The same for parents. I don't want them to keep on having to go down, 2 and 3 hours away to do residential treatment programs. We should have something here for them to be able to do as well. And again, having those services, having those resources is going to promote public safety all around, because when you treat people like people and they feel human, they act like humans. When you treat people like they don't matter, like they're the lowest common denominator, or like animals, then that's the result that you get. And so we've got to figure out a way to use the funds that are here to protect and care for all of those people.
Okay, great.
That was very beautiful.
Yeah, it was.
I want to add.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Rodney. Okay. Miss Wendy, when you talked and Whitney, excuse me, when you talked about the foster care, I personally think that aging out is the worst thing that can happen to a child. And you just throw them away. We can't do nothing else for you. I think somehow we got to address that. You just can't throw a kid away that don't know nothing.
Well, so Douglas County, I will say, so I have had the opportunity to work and represent DFACS in Douglas County and in Polk County. Prior to my work representing the department, I also was a parent attorney. I represented kids. So I have been the children who are aging out attorney. One thing that I will say about Douglas County's foster care system is APLA, which is the program that you're talking about where kids just age out, is the absolute last resort. Unfortunately, when you lose programs like the CSB that are helping us rehabilitate parents and families, you are losing access to the greatest population of people who want to care for kids are the people who had these kids. And if we can't get them on the right track or on the right footing, I do think that you're going to see a rise in children who do age out of care. We have to be able to service these families. Again, this is more on a state level than necessarily Douglas County, but we've got to look at a way to address legislation where we are paying kids or families who foster the children instead of pouring those resources into the parents of those children. A lot of our youth stay in foster care, again, because the parents don't have access to transportation or they don't have access to stable and safe housing. We could house the people, these families, and give them services in home for less than what we pay for the kids to stay in foster care. I also think I don't think people give enough credit that DFACS doesn't want your house to be perfect. We just want your house to be safe. And so if we had more services that safely housed homeless people where they could take their kids with them, that's an option. That would keep your child from aging out of foster care. But we have to get creative again in our solutions to address and attack these issues, and making sure that funding is being allocated to that.
So when we talk about aging out, we know that a kid is about to age out. Why couldn't we intensify some kind of program to prepare them? Because the day is going to come when you got to put them out.
So the kids do participate in ILP services. It's like intensive learning services, and that is driven towards helping them learn how to like manage a budget. A lot of the times these kids end up in they're group homes, but they're more like apartment style settings, so that they're learning how to manage their day-to-day needs, wash clothes, grocery shop, all of those kind of things. The problem is we have to send them out of county to have those kinds of access to resources. So we really need to look at funding opportunities, or partnerships with private organizations who want to bring something like that to Douglas County, so that we can aggressively service these kids where they live in the communities that they are from. They get access. If they're in foster care, we can pay for them to go to college and things like that. But kids do the best when they stay in the communities that they are from. And I think the disconnect is that we don't have that service or resource here, so they're having to be sent away from their core group of extended family. They're losing their fictive kin connections. They're losing their friendship connections. And then, that's a never-ending vicious cycle of, sadness, depression, behavioral issues, concerns, all of those things. So we really do have to get creative in solutions that bring that here so that they can stay in this community. And then, of course, my shameless plug is we just need more foster families. Like, we do need more people who are willing to come and sign up to be a resource, especially for our teenage youth. It's very easy to place a baby, not so easy to place a 15-year-old.
Teenager, right, exactly. Lastly, when we talked about affordable housing, the last three things that we talked about, education, healthcare, and public safety, maybe you already said this, but somehow I think that we need to make an incentive for those groups to have an incentive to have housing. Give them a break so they can afford a house.
For the youth?
No, for teachers, police officers.
Oh gosh, yes. I would.
Yeah.
There are states all over the country. There are counties all over the country that do have very similar incentive programs, like what you see. One of the simplest, I guess, analogies to use would be how police officers, if you live in this apartment complex and you drive your squad car home from work because it's present parking lot, we will reduce your rent. We absolutely should be having programs like that. If you are a first responder, if you're a nurse, if you are a teacher, we absolutely should have some sort of incentive for you to be able to live affordably if you are in rental units in the county. I would love to see something like that come here. And if a proposal or a plan could get put together for that, that is something that I would absolutely be in support of. And then I would say extending beyond teachers, the auxiliary service providers for that as well. So I would also include bus drivers,
Yes.
and your cafeteria staff and workers, and then the school resource support personnel. So those on-campus therapists that are in the schools, you know, those individuals who keep it running and functioning, but unfortunately are often forgotten. I will say that takes me back to something that I would love to see the county move towards, and promotes public health and education. I would love the opportunity to find a way to implement free breakfast and lunch programs, if there was a way that we could successfully do that in the budget, because if you keep these students fed and they're not hungry, behavioral issues in the classroom go down, access to healthy foods goes up, kids' overall brain function is positively impacted. And so I would just love to have an opportunity to explore that on a county-wide level as well.
Great. Thank you, ma'am.
Hey,
Okay.
good questions, Kevin. Before we move to environmental stewardship, which Kevin has next, Whitney, I would tell you that infrastructure and services is always the absolute longest category that we have. So it's not an issue. But before we move on, I wanted Kevin to get all of his follow-ups in. Is I know you've referenced the CSB a few times, and I just want to make sure. I'm not sure if you ever had an opportunity to say what the CSB is, but it is the Community Service Board. Just want for our listeners to understand that that's what that is. It's a great board that is desperately needed in our community, and I'm sure you would keep up the fight for that. You know, if you become a
Absolutely.
commissioner, yeah, absolutely. And also, you're the first person, the first candidate that I've heard mention midwifery. And look, so we know that there's a huge disparity, right? Between women of color, mothers, expectant mothers delivering and dying on the delivery bed, and also infants dying. The disparity is huge. And Kevin talked about, and you guys talked about, programs in the school and who can receive subsidies and all these kind of things. But I think that to decrease, I think that midwifery and doulas would go a long way in decreasing this mortality in the babies and in the mothers. And before we move on to environmental stewardship, because you're the only candidate that talked about it, and again, it shows your uniqueness, for the position. And I want you to just expound on that a little bit more about the importance of midwifery and doulas.
So both of my children, actually, I used midwives throughout my pregnancies and in their births. And so obviously a midwife is not a licensed doctor, but they are licensed professionals whose sole job is to work with mothers while they are in pregnancy, through labor and delivery, and through postpartum. The beauty of a doula, a birth coach, is that they can help you kind of cut down or minimize some of those medical interventions that do end up leading towards complications that we see in Black and brown women. And so having those two career fields, one, they're both very lucrative. Being a private midwife or a private doula, you are coming out earning a livable wage. You are doing good for the community and you are doing good for the environment. But the one thing that they have the ability to do that doctors don't is house calls. Most of the complications that we see in women postpartum or after birth are things that happen to them once they've been discharged from the hospital and they are at home. And so it would be an invaluable service if we could provide some network or chain of midwives and doulas to go and maybe we have them work up under the public health department and give them a line item in the budget that says this is going to postpartum care for women in Douglas County, and that they go around and they check on you after birth. There was a documentary several years ago, I think it's called Birthing Way. Don't quote me on that, but there is a documentary. Ricky Lake did it. Okay. And they talked about the incidences of women who pass away postpartum drastically reduces just from having that initial visit from a doula or a midwife in your home after birth, because they're checking for, are you having excessive bleeding? Is your coloring off? Does something just not look or feel right? They're engaged. They're there to make sure that they know how to treat you or get you access to the medical care. But the one point that I think people forget when they're thinking about midwives and doulas, and something that unfortunately I see in my line of work, is the number of kids who pass away from SIDS. That is also reduced by having access to appropriate postpartum care, making sure that we have access to educators, whether they are doulas, midwives, or someone from the health department who is certified in safe sleep techniques that can come to your home. Make sure that the things where you are sleeping or placing your baby to sleep is appropriate, so that these kids can live, grow, and thrive in our community. I just think that that would be such an invaluable resource to have.
Great. I appreciate it. And for our listeners, I believe SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome. Okay, great.
Sudden infant death syndrome.
All right, Kevin, you got it.
Okay, here I go. Environmental stewardship. What initiatives do you support for environmental sustainability and conservation within our county?
So actually, one of my major focuses when I was on the planning commission in Washington State was making sure that we had design controls for how land is cleared in the development process. It pains me to drive down the street and see just a blanket clearing of a plot of land, because that makes development on that land easier. And I understand that when it's easier and it takes less time, it's less expensive. But we have got to start making sure that we are thinking about what the long-term impact is. What does that look like in terms of erosion? And how does that erosion impact how many times we have to continue to repair roads that get washed out or bridges that don't work as efficiently, because we did not think through what the effect or impact was going to be if we just blanketly cleared this land. Also, where's that wildlife going to go? I had my car totaled on Riverside Drive not long ago because, Bambi is bounding across the road and they don't have anywhere to live, and that you get sideswiped. Like, what are you going to do with that? So we have got to make sure that these developers are being required to maintain some portion of habitat for these animals to be in, because we also don't want these animals being pushed into people's neighborhoods either. And so we've got to start thinking about some architectural and design controls that are not just completely deforesting an area, because that's the easiest way to get that building here. It's going to take some creativity, it's going to take time, and it's going to cost a little bit more, but it's worth it in the long run for our residents' quality of life and for the quality of life of the wildlife that we serve.
Okay. I don't know if this fits in here or not, but I'm just going to throw it out and see if it sticks on the wall. When you talk about clearing land and all that, I've been seeing on the news a bunch of old black cemeteries being discovered. Mm-hmm. How do we fix that? I mean, we talk about the animals, but what about our ancestors?
Oh,
that just being thrown away?
We have got to make sure that, and I do think that Douglas County does already have some ordinances on the books that protect, like the discovery of like slave quarters. If you go through sometimes when the kudzu's not very high, you'll see those old fireplaces or chimneys that cannot be torn down. There's rules and regulations that have to be developed around that. So one, making sure that we're maintaining that. I would love to see a geological study done, and I mean that's a lofty goal, but far and beyond the Douglas County Board of Commissioners, but to see what we can do to identify where some of these locations might be in our area so that we can get some historical landmarkers. I think that would be beautiful if there was a way to tie those things into our pre-existing trail system so that people have a way to access it, learn about our history, find out what has been going on in Douglas County and in the surrounding areas. But the first thing is making sure that we have zoning regulations that prohibit you from digging up, destroying, or building on top of old cemeteries and things like that. And then once they are located, getting them designated as historical areas, it definitely will go a long way to preserving that.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. How you balance economic development with environmental concerns?
I kind of think that goes back to my original answer. There are tons of communities around the country who have just said, we are going to require companies that want to come and build in our area to build with these materials, to make sure that we maintain safety. And I definitely think we need to institute some of that here. So being very specific in our architecture and design controls. I think making sure, again, that we are looking at what quality of life those businesses bring to residents, like if there's specific beautification projects or things like that that they are able to bring in with their development, would definitely help out and go a long way. A lot of times, again, people say, oh, you can't make these businesses do this or that, but McDonald's is red and green everywhere you've seen, correct? But in Arizona, it's green. Or red and yellow everywhere that you've been, but that one is green, because if businesses want to be in your area, they're going to comply with what you've asked them to do or what you've requested of them. And I think we just have to find out what our residents really want, what those values and priorities are, and stick to them and make the businesses that come here stick to them.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Social issues. How do you plan to address social issues such as affordable housing, homelessness, and mental health services within the county?
I definitely think we've got to figure out a way to ramp up funding for some of those public health programs and public health programming. Making sure that, again, we have access first and foremost to affordable housing. So looking at, are we having a large number of our homes purchased or bought up by investors that are keeping people from being able to own those? There's a bill at the Senate right now specifically about how much stopping landlords from being able to charge 3 times or 4 times what the actual rent is, controlling some of those requirements, because that's just not realistic right now. The average median household income for young, just a married couple of 2 is about $57,000. But if your average rental is $2,000 a month and you have to earn 3 times that, that's $72,000 a year. No, you can't meet that fresh out of college. Like, that's just not, unless I'm living a different life than everybody else. I was broke as a joke when I came out of college. So that would have just been far from attainable, just a nonsense idea. And if there's not access to those affordable rentals, you're already at a deficit, because, again, you cannot start to build wealth and acquire that next level or next status if you don't have an address. So we have to make sure that those people are being, that all of our people are being taken care of.
Great. Part 2, what steps will you take to ensure equity and inclusiveness or inclusivity for all residents?
I think that kind of goes back towards making sure that we are having diversity in our housing offerings. We have got to make sure that we maintain a good mix of rental units, of single family homes, of multifamily homes, apartment complexes. But I think also, we have to make sure that we are spreading the wealth throughout the county in general, so that people don't find themselves continuing to cluster and not having the access or opportunity to maybe live on a different side of town, or go to a different school, whatever. We just have to make sure that we're spreading that out a little bit to make sure that all of our residents are being serviced by what Douglas County has to offer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are gung-ho about supporting homelessness, as long as it's not in my neighborhood.
So I think, again, we have to move back towards a human-centered way of dealing with people, because you don't know why someone's homeless. And
Right.
I hate to hear the stigma of, oh, that person must be a drug addict or a substance
Yeah.
abuser, or that they have somehow done something wrong. We have, at this point in time, some of the highest population of gainfully employed two-parent households who are experiencing homelessness right now.
Exactly.
Through absolutely no fault of their own. And if people are being honest with themselves, the greater majority of our residents are one bad accident or one illness away from being homeless themselves. It doesn't take a whole lot. 2 or 3 missed paychecks, if you have not adequately planned for that, can devastate you financially. We have so many people who are living in their cars or couch surfing, staying in extended stays, who do not have mental health issues, who do not have substance use issues, who are not, criminals, who have not done anything other than not be able to earn a living wage, even though they are doing everything that they are supposed to do. So, do I think that it's appropriate to have the homeless people living in a tent city behind the courthouse? Absolutely not. Every human deserves dignity. Why can't we figure out a way to bring tiny home communities to Douglas County, subsidize them for a period of time, help these people get on their feet? Again, get our people workforce ready so that the companies that come can pay them into these lucrative careers, whether it is in construction or if it's in IT. Making sure that we are raising the wages for teachers. There are homeless teachers right now that service your children every single day. There are teachers right now who are waiting in the food pantry line or are being serviced by clothing drives and things like that. That is completely unacceptable. And our budget needs to reflect our commitment to servicing all of our citizens. And there's definitely craftier ways than putting them in a tent city behind the courthouse.
I like what you said about inclusion, because just because a person's down and out and we want to try to provide some kind of economic support for them, everybody don't want to be a babysitter or baking bread. I want to be an IT specialist.
Right.
I got good grades in high school. I'm just down on my luck right now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't send me to learn how to, chop wood.
Right.
I'm good at math.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a dignified job. I really appreciate that, Miss Whitney. Okay.
So Kevin,
My question, right?
no, yeah, Kevin. So let's see. I was just going to add to that is so when we talk about inclusiveness. Well, first of all, I want to just say this. Like Whitney said, some people, they're one paycheck or away from being in the same situation of the people that they are looking down their nose at. And look, we're talking to a person who is wanting to become our next county commissioner. Okay? So I will say this too, to everybody that's listening. You also may be one election away from being in the same situation that a lot of these people are going to be in. A lot of people are in. So we can't. And those are two professions, as you know, Kevin, and I think as you know, Whitney, is that I participated in being an educator. And these teachers are homeless or sleeping in their cars, or you got veterans who's sleeping in their cars or are homeless, and so. All the lip service about appreciating your service, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a first responder, whether you're a veteran, put your money where your mouth is. And I think Whitney, I think you covered that very well.
One quick thing. I'm sorry, one quick thing. When we talk about veterans, I don't participate in the free meals on November 11th. Because on November 10th and November 12th, you don't give a damn about me as a veteran. But on November 11th, you want to take a picture of me eating some food that you was going to throw away. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, sorry. That was a pet peeve.
I'm so glad that you mentioned veterans. As I said when I started this, but both of my parents are veterans of the Army. My brother-in-law is a veteran of the United States Navy. Both of my grandfathers served in the Army as well. I wanted to be a Marine. And so I wholeheartedly agree. We got to pay more than just lip service to our veterans, because it's unfortunate, but if you go through the tent city behind the courthouse, I would venture to say about half of them are former service members. And we have got to figure out a way to fund programs that help men. We have a lot of offerings for single moms, for people that have children. But again, if a gentleman who has served this country cannot get an address, cannot get access to a primary care provider, doesn't have a social worker that can come out and check on him, and has nowhere to live, how is that person going to get back on their feet? We've got to take care of the veterans that we have here, and I think that we can be a place that ends up being desirable and attractive for them to want to come and relocate when they end their service, and they would be wonderful pillars of our community to help in terms of mentorship opportunities and being an example of what manhood is supposed to look like, so that these young boys in these high schools and in middle schools have someone to look up to. But once we get them here, we have to take care of them and make sure that they can give back to the community in the ways that I know that they want to.
Well, Whitney, we knew eventually we're going to get it out of you about your strong family background in the military. So without having to say it ourselves, so we know that you come from a family of military people and wanted to enter the military yourself. But as the Black Man's Roundtable, we also appreciate you talking specifically about programs that could benefit specifically men as well. We appreciate that. All right, Kevin, all yours, buddy.
Okay. Collaborating with other agencies. How do you intend to collaborate with other local, state, and federal agencies to address shared challenges and opportunities?
So that's actually one thing that I did have the opportunity to do quite a bit of when I worked in DE&I, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of what you do in those programs is work through intergovernment agreements or memorandums of understanding to identify what the scope of work is going to be between two organizations for a specific purpose. So obviously, a perfect example of that is working with the Water and Sewer Authority here in Douglas County to make sure that we're well funding them for infrastructure advancements, expansions, things like that, places where it may fall under someone else's purview, but a little bit of money from the county would help or be beneficial to that organization. And so I definitely understand making sure that we're having robust partnerships. Again, I know I keep bringing up the Community Services Board, but it's just the easiest example to use. That is a collaborative opportunity for the county. That is a private organization that the county is assisting and supplementing so that they can provide substance use, mental health, and youth programming for our community. So making sure that they have a reason to continue to want to do business here, that we're holding true to the contracts that we sign with these people, and then that we are funding them in appropriate ways.
Okay. Second part. Can you provide examples from your past experiences of successful interagency collaboration?
So I think one example of that would be, when I worked at Portland State University, we had several programs where students could come and take specific classes that maybe were not offered at other universities, but that had specific diversity, equity, and inclusion focuses. And those definitely do work well, especially when you have students who may have been from maybe a more rural area, maybe didn't have a lot of exposure to people who think or work a little bit differently. And so making sure that they have opportunities to bring their strong suits to the table, but also learning in an environment where it's very well established. I think that works well. Another example is what I do right now in my everyday job. I'm a private attorney, but I work in connection with the Attorney General's office as a contractor for them to provide legal representation for DFACs in different counties around the state. And so making sure that you are vetting people who are well qualified to provide the service that you need, that you maybe cannot have for whether it's bandwidth issues, access, or proximity. So I think that that's a a small example of how something like that works and how it can be successful between multiple different agencies. And the Board of Commissions does that regularly. There's a service that needs to be provided that the county doesn't have the bandwidth to provide, but you can find an organization that can provide that, partner with them, and then have that work out.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we move to our last category, two things from the past category is don't apologize for using CSB, the Community Service Board. It can't be talked about enough, in my opinion. So, and you've talked about it a lot, but if you talk about it even in this last category, don't apologize. And you also said for the listeners, Portland State University, that was out in Portland, Oregon, right? Right, because you are a licensed attorney in Oregon and Georgia, right?
Oregon as well.
Yep. So,
correct.
All right, just for the listeners. Okay, last category is public input and decision making. Part one, how will you seek input from the community when making important decisions?
So I think part of your biggest role in a position like this is that the community needs to feel safe and confident that they have elected the person who is actually there to advocate for their needs. I go back and forth and I hear a lot of people say, oh, the residents have to show up. But if the residents have elected you to be their representative, you're doing that because you know that they work a 9 to 5, and that's being, polite. Some people are working a 10 to 10, an overnight shift. They just really may not have the bandwidth to come and sit in these meetings. But to do your job well, you're going to have to make sure that you are having some form of listening sessions with your constituents, going around to their neighborhoods and making sure that they specifically are knowledgeable or aware. I would love to have a newsletter that outlines what's going to be on the agenda, what's coming up, what are we going to review, and here is the email address for you to send your concerns or requests for further information if there's a question that you want asked, so that I have that information and then can take that back to those meetings that you may not be able to be at and make sure that your voice has the opportunity to be heard. But I don't think that you are getting realistic feedback from people if you're always just asking what do you want to see? What do you want to do? Tell them what's coming up. Tell them what is possible. Who wants to come and develop here? Who wants to be a business here? How do you feel specifically about this particular item? Instead of these, touchy-feely feel-good, oh yeah, I want this. Well, that doesn't mean squat if that's not what's up for a vote right now. Like, that doesn't help you. And I think that missing that point is why people get disenchanted with the voting process in general. People go out, they make all of these promises to these people, and it might not even be related to what you actually do in this position. You just told people what felt good. Like, the work of the Board of Commissioners is not sexy. Like, there is nothing about this that is, just this great front page news story that people are just going to automatically be in the know and be telling you relevant things. And because of that, we have got to take the information to them. We've got to say, hey, AWS wants to come and develop a data center here. This is what it would look like. What do you think about this? What do you want me to take back to the Board of Commissioners and advocate on your behalf so that they are actually well informed about the issues? The other thing that I would love to do when elected to this position is making sure that people actually understand what the definition and rules are for a Board of Commissioners. Because, if we're being honest, I don't think that most people know. Honestly, I didn't know 100%. I had a general idea of what a commissioner did, but until you're in a race like this, until you are hands-on, until you are looking at the strategic plan, until you are in the comprehensive plan, until you are going to these meetings regularly, most people are not like me. They're not going to pull out a code book and go through it to find out, exactly what they do. So I fault no one for not knowing specifically what a commissioner does. It's my responsibility once elected in this position to make sure that everyone that's coming to me knows the difference between a commissioner versus a city council person versus your tax commissioner versus your coroner, so that people are going to the right places for the right information, which will also lead to more appropriate input and feedback for these commission meetings.
Great. I definitely, before we move to part 2, which is the last part of all the questioning for this interview, I appreciate, I think you're the only one that did this, you actually explained representative government. And yeah, I know that if you're elected to this position, you're going to continue to educate the people, about what a commissioner does, because you've stated it on here. But I think a good start is letting them know that that it is a representative piece of the government, and if this is where electing the commissioners is the most important, because they, like you said, you're going to represent District 2 when District 2 cannot be there, right? So to get to know who Whitney Kenner Jones is right now, instead of people, I don't like it all the time when people are like, well, come down to all these meetings, make sure you go to every single meeting. It's like, well, what the world we got representative government for if we got to, if it comes to everything, right? So I feel you on that, and I appreciate you being honest, and I think that it's a great start of letting people know that this is a representative part of the government. It's not an executive piece, of the government. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I tell myself all the time, I took civics 20 years ago. And there's just no way that I can remember all of the things from those lessons. And so I would be foolish to expect all of our constituents to remember that. And so I do think that it is incumbent upon all elected officials to bring it back to the basics and make sure that people just really do know what you actually can do in the position that you have been elected to. Just keep it a buck with people. Don't be selling these high ideals and lofty goals, knowing that once you get there, we do not have executive order. We cannot just sign off and then that is it. And making sure that people know that we're not fighting for you. It just may be outside of the scope of what's available.
And I would tell the local and state elected officials is, if you don't want to be the person that have to explain all this civic stuff to everybody, well, use your sphere of influence, use your position to get civics back into the schools. Then you won't have to worry about explaining.
Amen.
All right, wait, then we can move on to the part 2 before we, in what ways will you ensure that diverse voices are heard and considered?
I think the best way that I will be able to do that is that I'm not coming to the table with an agenda. I'm not here to do my own work. I'm here to do the work of the people, and that comes with a clean slate and listening to all of the voices at the table, even when it is someone whose ideologies may differ drastically from mine. There's genius in everything that someone thought was crazy initially, and so you just really have to be open-minded and in your consideration for what you are willing to do in these positions. I don't believe in silencing people just because they have a different thought or opinion about mine. Let's figure out where the common ground is, because the solution is usually somewhere in the middle. It's not on the far left or on the far right anyway. And you have to think about, what can I do for the satisfaction of the majority, because there's always going to be outliers. No matter what you do, somebody ain't going to like it. And you're trying your best. But if you can find that central or common ground when you are resolving issues that impact everybody, that's when the best work is done. And the only way to do that is to be able to go along and get along and find common ground with people who think differently than you. And again, I'll take it back. to being a military brat, that is something that is inherent in me at this point, because you cannot live all over the country and all over the world and not run into somebody who thinks completely differently from you. And you've got to be respectful of those people. You have to be able to work well with them, and make sure that they know that you respect them, because in turn then they will respect you, and then the best work gets done.
All right. Well, that rounds up all the questioning. Went a little bit longer than normal, but with a lot of these areas, your background is pretty deep, and so we wanted you to elaborate on some of the things that we know that people who know what your background is wanted to hear. So, and that's one of our biggest responsibilities in moderating this. So, again, Attorney Whitney Kenner Jones, we appreciate your time tonight, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. And on behalf of, almost forgot. Got to close it out. Let people know where they can donate. Let people know when to vote for you and your website and all that good stuff.
So early voting is going on right now through Friday, March the 8th. You can vote on Election Day on March the 12th. The polls will be open until 7 o'clock at night on March the 12th, so please don't miss your opportunity to let your voice be heard. Participating in your local elections has the greatest impact on your life, so please don't just go only for the president. Show up for these local races as well. You can find me on my website at electwhitneykennerjones.com, and our buttons to donate are also located on that website. We are also on Instagram at Whitney Kenner Jones and on Facebook at Elect Whitney Kenner Jones, and I sincerely ask for your support and your vote, as I really am the candidate that is here to represent the people.
Great. And on that note, on behalf of my co-moderator, Kevin Evans, we appreciate everybody watching. We appreciate everybody with the live stream. I think Facebook finally got right and got on. YouTube was on without an issue. So until next time, we will see you out in them suites and them streets. See you next time.
Thank you.
Don't forget to check us out on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Do you have show ideas or want to be on the show? Shoot us an email at blackmansroundtable@gmail.com. And please follow us on Facebook.